called Wind Blowing. That is the movie we are talking about today, directed and written by Dion Copeland. Now, this is essentially a movie, a creature feature about kids stuck in a cabin in the woods and there's a creature outside. That is your basic kind of log line for this movie. But let me just give you a little bit more context about it. It takes place over Christmas, and we have 6 individuals, 3 guys, 3 girls, and one of them a brother and sister, and they decide they're going to get away from their families and spend it together in this kind of remote cabin in the woods. They are, of course, warned off by the locals, and when they go there is, of course, some type of creature outside that has a taste for human flesh. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie to find out. So, the interesting thing I think about this film is there's certain elements that are the same element that I think both work and don't work, which I'm going to go through with you. But let's just go through the positives first of all. Let's talk about what does work. Now, the story is very simple, so it's not a hard film to follow, and it kind of goes on that classic template, as I say. But that is a template that kind of works. You can't fault a movie for having a very simple premise, and plenty of movies do that. But there are a couple of things here that I did enjoy, and a lot of it comes from character moments. Now, having good characters is one of the most important factors for me about how I enjoy a movie, and there's certain things here that I thought were quite good. For example, when we have our 6 individuals travelling up to this cabin, they go in 2 different cars, boys in one, girls in the other. And both at different times, they stop off at the same kind of like convenience store, kind of petrol, gas station, whatever you want to call it. And the people in this kind of station treat them differently, because one's a group of girls, one's a group of guys. And I just thought that was kind of a neat little kind of section there that was just kind of fun, and our kind of kids' reactions to them were obviously different because of their experience. I just thought that was kind of that was quite neat and kind of a little bit different to maybe what you see in a lot of these standard fares. But the thing that really kind of impressed me about the work for the characters here is how they act when the threat is revealed. So, around halfway through the movie or so, they come aware that there is some type of entity outside. And with a lot of these movies, a lot of horror films, I always find that the depiction of fear is very kind of muted and kind of Hollywood sort of style, and people still are kind of acting in a very kind of too organised, too thoughtful, without really panicking. One of the things I did enjoy about this movie is the way that these 6 individuals, and all 6 of them, just absolutely lose their shit and are absolutely just terrified and panicking, and kind of their interaction seems so genuine, which is such a refreshing change from a lot of these kind of both low budget and high budget movies. I did a kind of a top 10 cliches that I hate in horror films, and one of them was the way people the lack of kind of like genuine fear that you get from people, because obviously they want to have something spooky, something supernatural. Now let's kind of move on and kind of get on with the plot. But here, you did really feel these characters, I think, portrayed a realistic depiction of how people would be reacting, and some of them are absolutely, can't handle it, and so, I thought it was very good. And it's a small thing for maybe some, but for me, I quite like kind of believable characters. Now, I do have some problems with the kind of the characterization, which will come on to in maybe what I don't like, but I just want to say that side of stuff I thought was pretty good. And I have to say as well, genuinely speaking, the acting was all pretty good to go hand in hand with that. So again, I thought the characters were kind of well realised, and then well acted by our cast here. I think giving ultimately the characters are the typical kind of like college kids types, but nonetheless, I think they did a pretty good job of portraying their kind of their particular kind of characters. It's probably not a stretch, because they're probably not all that different from their real personalities, but again, it is what it is. I thought the acting for these guys were a little bit, was enjoyable, was good. A little pin in it, because there is one thing I want to say about it, however. And I think the pace of the movie is pretty good as well. So, it starts off reasonably kind of subtly. We don't quite know what's going on, and then these the kind of the threat becomes more and more virulent as the kind of the movie kind of goes on, and as such the kind of the level of threat increases with time. And I think they have this might be a negative for some, but they don't go over the top with the body count in some ways. I actually think it kind of works in the movie's favour, again having a little bit more of a kind of somewhat of a realistic kind of feel to it. And I will say it's shot in an interesting way. I don't know if it necessarily works, but it's that there are times here where it has a somewhat of a found footage aesthetic, and I don't know those shots work, and I'll come on to it again. But for the most part, I think it was relatively kind of well shot. Okay, so let me just go through what I think doesn't work in this movie, and a lot of it's going to be the inverse of what I've just said. So, although I think the majority of the film is quite well shot, there are certain sequences, and this is where our characters go outside in the woods, and there's obviously like a spotlight on them, because they're kind of lit like there's a spotlight in front of them, not like it's kind of like a natural light, if that makes sense. Now that would be fine if you were doing a found footage movie and you had the context of a camera pointing at them, but there isn't. You know, this is like, these are just meant to be people out in the woods with kind of natural light. And I get, obviously, if you're out in the woods, it's just going to be pitch black, so you have to kind of illuminate it. But this is why you have things like these umbrella lights to kind of spread the light out so it kind of looks, you know, it falls more evenly, rather than a kind of a spotlight that looks like someone is literally there with a kind of, you know, a spotlight pointed at the kind of the character, which gives it this kind of found footage aesthetic. And it isn't a found footage movie. So there are some sequences that I think are well shot, but there are some sequences that I think are not well shot. The acting, let me just come back to that. I actually think the acting is relatively good, but there is some horrible ADR, especially at the beginning of the movie, which gives the kind of the characters this false kind of like it's almost dubbed in a certain way, which I think distracts from, I think, what was perfectly acceptable performances and makes them seem a little bit crappy. Now, I think maybe people will put this as bad acting, but I actually think it's more bad ADR than anything else. Now let's kind of go on to the kind of the characters. Now again, I said some positive things about how these sort of characters are depicted, but there's one thing that really bugged me about this movie in regards to the way the characters were written, and that is massively inflated drama. You know, we're meant to believe there's these 6 people that are all kind of so good friends that they're leaving their families and spending it together for Christmas. But as with one of the kind of tropes with these horror films, there is always kind of like artificial drama to have conflict within the group. And it just seems too much. It just seems like they turn the tap on too much in this instance, because people have, you know, all of these kind of like various people have some sort of problem with at least one other person within the group at some point. And it's just like, well, it just seems like drama for drama's sake. Pad out the running time to kind of have these kind of like these interactions tested. You know, I've gone away with groups of friends and I've never argued with them like that and things like this. I mean, it just seems to be one of the tropes. I get some people might get, especially when the kind of the tension starts to build up, but it seems like artificially inflated drama, melodrama, if you will. So that was, you know, that was a little bit disappointing, considering I thought the actual character work outside of that was actually fairly well done. But here's one thing which is negative, which is there's no positive about it. There's no way I can put a positive spin on this. And this is the actual creature itself. My God, it looks terrible. It looks no budget. I mean, we don't really know what the creature is. I'm assuming it's a Wendigo, although we're giving no context about what this thing is, how it operates. You know, it seems to be kind of emulating kind of human voices at one point. We don't know anything about it. The movie gives us no information whatsoever. But the look of it is terrible, and physiology, it doesn't make sense in the context of how this creature operates. But it seems to have like its head appears to be the skull of a deer, and yet it's able to kind of like bite through bone and stuff, and it's like, well, how does that work? You know, how does it open and close its jaw? It doesn't make any sense. You know, it's not meant to be this undead creature, is it? I mean, we just don't know. It doesn't make any sense. And then basically, it's like a kind of like a stag's or a deer's skull, and someone with a black sheet over it, and that is it. that is it. And we see some kind of like horror hands, which are not bony. They're kind of like just clawed hands. I'm like, well, it doesn't really make any sense. I don't understand how this creature, it doesn't make any logical sense to how it exists or how its physiology works and things like that. It just seems to be like, what have we got? Skull. We got some kind of horror gloves and. Yeah, but it can kind of like this deer skull can bite through bone. Can it, with no muscles attached to it? Really, can it? It doesn't make any sense. So the creature itself is very, very disappointing. You don't see a lot of it, and now you know why, because it doesn't work. If the creature itself is so ridiculously shit, it just isn't very good. Not very good. Anyway. So what can we say overall about this movie? I do think a lot of it is propped up by some realistic kind of scenes, or for this kind of style of movie anyway. So, but it's certainly not an above average film for me. This does fall as a below average. So I'm going to give this one a 4 out of 10, but it's still watchable to a degree. I still think there is some enjoyment to be had. But there you go. It's a 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.